I am so excited to kick off what I'm calling this summertime series of conversations about the lives we allow ourselves to lead, which is a series of conversations with five people who have really interesting and unique life paths. And summertime felt like a good time to connect with these people because it's a great time to kind of, I don't know, let your imagination wander a bit, loosen your grip a little bit on should, and embrace a little bit more of want to. And for all of these people that I'm going to be chatting to, they sort of have built lives that they wanted. And I'm really excited to both explore their lives and explore the 10 permissions through the lens of their lived experiences. And I'm really happy to get started by welcoming Bree Groff. Welcome, Bree.
Oh, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. It's so exciting. And I know that I genuinely have somebody who's had a unique life path when any attempt to characterize their life's journey or their career feels like it falls short. I read your bio, I read your LinkedIn profile, and I was like, man, this is truly fascinating. So what I'd love for you to do just to get us started is to sort of give us a like a bird's eye view of this winding path that you've been on and where it's led you to today.
Sure. Yeah. So you're right. If I'm at like a cocktail party and someone's like, "What do you do?" I say management consulting, and then I don't have to talk about it
Right,
anymore. People are like, "Oh,
right.
okay." But the
Yeah.
truth is, yeah, I have had a pretty winding road. So my my first career out of school was teaching. I was a biology and psychology major in college, and my parents were both educators. My dad was a principal, my mom was a kindergarten teacher, and so I started in teaching seventh grade math. And um, it's like there's when I'm telling my story, there's so much I sort of gloss over. But the truth
Mm.
is, after that first year, I was living in LA, and I was like, I think I want to be an actor. I'd always done like acting classes. I'd done a lot of dance and like loved performing arts. So then I spent a year trying to be an actor in LA.
Okay.
Uh, from there, I was like, oh, maybe I want to use my psychology degree. So I was a research assistant at eHarmony for a while.
Oh my gosh.
We were researching facial expressions and body language, and so I was like, yeah, I'm going to go pursue my PhD. So I could go on like that for like the
Right.
decades. It's like, and then
Right.
it was this, and then it was this.
And then that, and then that.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
The broad brushstrokes is I moved from education into consulting when I started to become more interested in how industries and organizations change. Uh, and then from there, after three different consultancies, I'm now at the point of launching my first book, which will be out this summer. So now I'm in the world of
Yay.
authorship.
Authorship.
But yeah, along the way, it was like quite winding. Even during the pandemic, we put our stuff in storage and headed off for the UK for a while and Jamaica for a while. So we
Oh
tried to,
wow.
embrace the nomadic lifestyle. So there's been lots of
Yeah.
adventures over the course of
Yeah.
my career and life, and I like it that way.
Mm. And I think it's so interesting what you said about how when you describe yourself or try to characterize yourself to somebody else, you kind of default to the most recognizable thing. Like, I so relate to that, that it's like,
Mhm.
"Oh gosh, how do I make myself sound most, like, recognizable?" And I think it's one of the things that people not fear, but worry about when they've got this kind of diverse lifetime portfolio of careers and capabilities and things they've done. It's like, "Oh gosh, do I sound like some weird jack of all trades?" Do I look like I'm not focused? And so such an interesting thing that so much of this, I think, is about how we show up to other people and how we think we're perceived by other people.
Yes, for sure, right? Because you're thinking, how do I say something recognizable? Like
Mm.
it's human nature to want to have a head nod on the other end of what
Sure,
you're saying. And
absolutely.
so yeah, we try and or I try and package it up in a way that makes sense. But yeah, it's usually only after 20 minutes of conversation or maybe a cocktail at that cocktail party that I'm like, let me tell you about the year I failed being an actor in LA and had a lot
Yes,
of fun doing it. Yeah, that only comes after a little while, but that's also like that's the interesting bit. They
Right,
say the quiet part out loud, and
right.
though that's sort of the interesting texture of any career or life.
Oh, totally. And I think for me, it relates to my first permission, which is be willful.
Mhm.
Sounds like I don't need to explain that to you. But it's about using desire as your driver and really tapping into like, what do I want? And what's really striking me as you talk about your story is this like accepting the fact that those wants are going to change and that's okay. Like I think a lot of people see it as like a character flaw. If after 2 years they don't want to do the same thing, it's like, oh, but I look flighty, I look unfocused. So can you talk a little bit about, your experience of listening in to what you want and then acting on it and responding to it?
Yeah, I've never felt bad about changing what I want. And sometimes I have to reflect on like, why is that? Because I recognize
Mm.
that in society it does seem flighty. But I
Yeah.
think I've always been attracted to the stories of others where
Mm.
there is a sense of adventure. If someone's like, oh, I was at this company for 20 years. Like on the one hand, I feel like that's really admirable. And you must have done so many good things. And what a way to see a company evolve. But on the other hand, the stories that spark my personal interest are the ones that have the variety and ups and downs. And in terms of, well, I guess maybe the other way I've thought about my career is I haven't thought of it as like choosing a life partner. Like I have a husband, and when I was dating, I
Mm.
was like, is this person for me? Is this person for me? And you're sort of like sorting through the people until you find one, and then that's your life partner, or that's like the mental
Right.
model,
Right.
normally. But for
Sure.
careers, I've never felt like, oh, education, I tried, but it wasn't for me. And now I'm onto consulting, and that's now more,
Mm.
and now I'm getting better. I think of it more like in terms of my meal plan for the week. So if we've ordered Mexican food 3 nights in a row because we love Mexican food, on the fourth night, I could sort of go for some Thai. But that doesn't mean that Mexican was wrong or that I don't want it again at some point. And I think of my career in the same way. Like I actually really loved my time in education and I didn't move away from it because it was wrong or bad. It was just like I'm kind of ready for some Thai food now. And maybe again in my
I
life
love that.
I'll teach, or do something else. And
Right. Right.
that sort of variety, I think, is what makes for me is what makes my life feel exciting. And so
Mm.
I crave those different chapters.
And that for me is like, wow, as you're talking, it feels like using my language, there's so much permission embedded in there because I think for most people, like it's of course totally fine to order Thai on Thursday, but the mindset of somehow my identity is fixed and it aligns to a profession or a role or a calling. And that's one of the reasons I kind of bridle sometimes at talk of purpose, like capital P and this. I think a lot of us do feel like there's a fixedness. And so I love that you've given yourself permission over and over again to say, okay, my wants have shifted and it's absolutely fine. In fact, more than that, it's a great thing to go and get something else, explore something else. For me, I talk a little bit about in my book about sort of finding your way as opposed to following the way. And it feels like that's what you're talking about, like a recognition that things will change and that my desires will change and circumstances will change. And it's a good thing to be responsive to that.
Yeah. And also like I find skills are so much more transferable. I think
Mm.
especially um I mean, especially in the careers that I've been in, teaching, consulting. I don't know. I suppose if you were like a neurobiologist, those skills are
Mm.
less transferable to accounting if you want to
Right.
make a change like that.
Yes,
Uh,
probably.
but teaching, like the only reason I'm good at facilitating executive offsites is because I practiced 8 hours a day with seventh graders, facilitating them in math class. Like I got really good at like being dynamic and planning
Right.
an experience that would be interesting, captivating, and enriching. And and I think those skills, so many skills are more transferable than we give them credit for. And
Totally.
whenever I entered a new organization, I never felt like, oh, I'm somehow behind or not as experienced. I mean, to be perfectly honest, maybe this sounds vain, but maybe it'll help other people. I sort of felt like, well, I'm the shiny new, like,
Yes.
person who's like experienced different things. Like I have a
Right.
novel point of view, and
Right.
I've always
Right.
felt that made me valuable in organizations. Um, because in most industries, most people stay. And so most
Right.
people in an industry know what everybody else knows. But if you can
Right.
bring something new, that's really unique value in that situation.
Oh, and I just so love that. And I so agree that it's like, gosh, remember that. Like, take that little kernel from Bree here, because I think it's so easy to feel like your novelty, your newness, your otherness is somehow a flaw or a deficiency, if you will, that you need to quickly correct, as opposed to, hi, I bring fresh perspectives, different skill sets. And I mean, the reality is a lot of people are going to be having to look at how to transfer what they know and what they know how to do. And I talk about it in terms of like having an I can versus I am mindset. So
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
instead of saying I am a teacher, it's like I can facilitate learning, I can organize learning events, I can communicate effectively to people. And when you start to break it down in that way, suddenly your sense of what's possible like goes, um, it's not like must look for next teaching job. It's like, okay, cool. Now what do I do with this? And to me, that's like never been more important than right now.
Yes. And I love the I can framing because also it makes the valuable skill the ability to learn and to be able
Right.
to say I can. Like
That's right.
I really love starting I mean, I think it's why I like consulting, why consulting has kept me interested because consulting is a career unto itself, but every new client is a new industry, a new company, a new set of leaders, a new culture. And so the skill set I'm bringing to that is learning all of that really quickly. And that's to
Right.
me, it's like, oh, how do I get good at understanding a culture? How do I get good at understanding an industry? Like
Mm,
I think that's exciting. Okay, like how does the money work in the industry? Who are the biggest players? What are the trends? Like all of those, um, those that sort of ability to just grok something really quickly. I do think
mm.
it's helpful, especially as like, it's changing every day which jobs AI is going to take. So I guess we all have to be ready.
Absolutely. And obviously, that's like the bigger context for my book. I think your book, to some extent, this conversation is that this whole finding your way, which might have once felt like the purview of a few people who were better suited for it or whatever, whatever, is now like, we've all got to sort of figure this out. And so, when my second permission is about going astray, which is basically stepping away from that mindset of a linear career, that idea that I am one thing, that's straight and is more desirable pathway to success. But again, I think that's really hard for people to not only embrace but like design to do intentionally, to say I'm going to almost embed change into my life path because that's how I learn. That's how I become more receptive and adaptive. Um, can you talk a little bit about like your lived experience of going astray, like what it took for you to make these decisions when, there still is a fair amount of pressure, but expectation that things will be linear, that you'll keep doing the same thing. What was that like for you to kind of be like, nope, time for something new?
Yeah, I think it takes being a little bit delusional, to be honest, like just a
Excellent.
pinch. Um, I mean that like in the best possible way, but you just like I remember when I told my parents I'm not going to go back to teaching the next year. I'm going to be an actor. My mom was like, "Oh, you're going to be a movie star." I love, like they were those kind of parents where they were not like, "Have you
Okay.
thought this through? And what are
Right.
the financial prospects?" My mom
Right.
was like, she just expected success. And that meant
Amazing.
a lot. And I feel like I
Yeah.
internalized that even, writing the book now, I've never written a book before. I've talked to a million people who have to try and understand how it works. And I have a very gracious publisher and is, helping me through the process. But I had to go into it thinking this book's going to be a bestseller. It's going to be a great success because otherwise it's hard to go into anything new feeling like,
Mm,
oh, I better like slowly wade my way in.
right.
And with that delusion, I mean, frankly, the the other part, it's like you need one part delusion and one part safety net. So the safety net, like I would have so much more money, I think, if I took a more traditional path, maybe. But
Maybe.
like, the year that I was acting, like I had my little pittance of savings from my teaching year. I was still tutoring, so I knew I had like a little bit of side income and hostessing. But I also knew, I mean, I had enough privilege that like the worst that was going to happen is I was going to be living at home with my parents for a year while I built up some savings. Like
Right.
knew that I wasn't risking total destitution. I was
Yeah.
risking, you know, asking for some help. Uh,
Sure.
and then similarly for any job change, like even my first consulting job didn't pay any more than teaching, which feels kind of weird. Like it probably should have. Um,
Right.
but I also felt like, well, that's okay because my living expenses were so low. I was used to living on like, I was very happy in my apartment with a roommate. And so it's those, you need sort of like the infrastructure of safety net
Hmm.
paired with the delusion of, I think this might go great. And then like those two things together was my felt experience of like, it's okay for me to be delusional because
Yeah.
once in a while I'll be wrong and that's okay. Like I know how to pick myself back up again. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
and
I think one of the things that happens when you do start to move and navigate through things is that you develop a sense of capability that's impossible to get by just going straight, right? I mean, you can only build that muscle because you do it the first time and it's like, oh gosh, I'm delusional. Is this going to work? Oh wait, it was okay. Like maybe imperfect, but I did it. And so for me, that's also why that was kind of building that change because it builds the lived capability to make change when you need to. And we all know the people who haven't because it's like, how am I going to be able to do this? Is this going to be okay? They're riddled with what ifs. Whereas I think when you, as you say, take the, let's call it boldness, to believe in yourself, along with the attention to the practicalities of, what resources do I have available right now to support me in this change? And so I talk a little bit about like bold intentions with small attention. So like I got a big idea of what I'm trying to do here and I want to nurture that, but the only way to do that is by tactically moving forward. So, what am I going to draw from that's going to help me to pursue this? Um and it's kind of what you're describing, I think, is that sort of combination of like belief and practical navigation. That allows you to take those steps forward. If you, because I think a lot of young people, would look at a life like yours and go, that sounds like really fulfilling. And it sounds really desirable to allow yourself to evolve through things. And yet we still channel young people into quite normative ways of thinking about their lives. And obviously, again, using my language, it's like a lot of them don't feel permitted to see their lives as this ever changing and possibly expansive path. What would you what would you say like to a young graduate who's maybe gone in who's in that position that you were in, that was like, okay, I'm a teacher, this is cool, but I'm considering change and I'm afraid. um you said be delusional but be practical. Are there any like resources, any capabilities that you think young people should really nurture to allow themselves to drive their own path the way that you have?
Yeah, you know, probably the most helpful thing for me for any transition I've made is seeking out and befriending people who have taken the leap before me,
Mm,
because it
yeah.
sort of humanizes what can otherwise feel like too wild a leap. So, for example, I mentioned we did a digital nomad thing during the pandemic for a while,
Mm,
but that was largely possible because I remember, well, I had this friend Daniel Lombardi who was a digital nomad back in like 2014 with a kid, with a 3-year-old, and he and his
okay.
wife were both designers, and they would just sort of bop around the world. And at the time I was like, that's crazy. Like,
Right.
it's like, how are you even doing this? Where are you doing your laundry? How are you doing childcare?
Yes, I've got
Like,
questions.
right? It didn't seem possible, but to have a
Yeah.
friend like that, and also to be able to then ask him questions like, no, for real, when are you like, when are you both working? And then he would tell me
Right.
like, well, I tend to work in the morning, and we tend to find like a local daycare for a few hours. And then my wife
Wow.
works in the afternoons, and this is how we're setting up our, like, this is our budget for, like, I needed to talk to somebody who could give me a real honest behind the scenes, and then it
Yeah.
didn't seem so magical. It felt more achievable. And I mean, that's been true. I was the CEO of a company called Nobel Collective,
Okay.
um a consultancy that's still around today. And I remember when I stepped into the CEO position, the first thing I did was ask friends, like, what other CEOs do you know that are CEOs of small service businesses? And can I talk to them? And so then I reached out to be like, well, how are you spending your time? How are you doing your forecasting? Because I didn't know any of this. And
Right.
so for a young person thinking, like, I'm in this job, it's stable, like, this is giving me what I need, economic uncertainty is wild. The best guidance I can give is think about what might sound a little bit more intriguing and fun and like a fuller version of the lifestyle you want to live, and see if you can find a person in the world living that lifestyle and pepper them with a few questions. Because whenever we can humanize a leap,
Mm,
it then we as humans feel like it's within our grasp. Or like
totally.
for any, you know, I often would think of startup CEOs, like the ones that are having like big rounds of investment and are like growing like crazy. And, especially during like the startup hate, I just felt like, oh, these people are machines. They're not even humans. Like, how are they possibly doing this? But then to meet them, they're like, oh, here's how you do it. You like sit down and make a presentation, and then you go to like 200 meetings where people reject you, and then you're like, oh, okay,
That's how you do it.
that's how you do it. And I think we just need to be more open with each other about what that
Yeah.
looks like, because if you desire that sort of a more creative kind of life, it's helpful to know how to get it.
Yeah. I love that. And obviously, I mean, on some super low key level, that's part of my intent with these conversations is maybe while somebody is wandering, having a walk, just listening to this, it's like, huh, maybe what feels, and I love the word magical because those things can feel like, ooh, she's got a certain kind of like voodoo to make this life work for herself. It's like, no, these things are happening. Maybe they're more possible than we think. And again, so I have this thing of like where I talk about, we get to have these lives if we want them in a world that's maybe more chaotic than ever. And then, the other piece of it is, well, maybe we've got to, which of course brings us to the impending implications of AI, which you've already referenced on our mindsets and our stories about what our careers are going to look like. And I think there's a lot of people right now who feel very afraid that um, either they are about to get displaced from the path that they're on, or younger people who are going, that path that my parents had just doesn't exist for me. And they're going to have to perhaps be more skillful in piecing together careers that will adapt and change or involve multiple pieces at the same time. Um, what's your take on this moment in terms of and let's talk about it positively, because there's plenty of doom out there, like the opportunities that exist for people right now to maybe pursue paths that, as you so beautifully described, are a fuller sort of expression of who they want to be and what they want to do.
Yeah. I always find sometimes the best things that happen to me are when something is taken away.
Mm,
Like, to give an example of like, I was dating this guy back around the time I was acting, and I thought he was so great. He's a terrible person, like really a liar. Anyway, he broke up with me, and I was like, no, how can this be? And he was like so wonderful, and I loved him. And then sort of later, I learned all of these nefarious things about him. And I was like, oh, that's so good that was taken from me because I couldn't
mm,
have pushed that away. So anyway, to bring it
right.
back to your question, there there are times I think not only in dating, but in careers when sometimes we don't have the fortitude and through no judgment, but we just don't have the will to push away the lovely, secure job with the salary and gets the approving nods and all of that. I was just actually talking to someone this past weekend who had been laid off, and he was saying, oh, I'm God, I was so stressed out. I was working nights and weekends. I was like giving everything to this role. And I just got laid off. And the first day after being laid off, I was like, oh, this is nice. Like, I really needed that.
Yeah,
Now, of course,
maybe
he's gonna
this
have to
is
like,
what I've been waiting for.
I know, right? So there are times, like in terms of your provocation of how to frame it positively, when things are taken
Mm,
from us, it actually sometimes does us a favor because it puts us in a position to create. And so for somebody who is feeling like, is my job going to be here in a few years? What's going to happen to my career? Do I need to be like hunkering down and saving as much as possible for the sort of economic apocalypse that's coming? There's nothing wrong with savings. Money always comes in handy in these situations. But also, I do think there are opportunities to restructure work in our lives. So a
mm,
good example, so there's like the freelancer, of course, that model has been
mm,
around for a long time.
mm,
It's very hard for lots of reasons, the ups, the downs, the selling yourself, but also you have the flexibility. There's also a huge rise of fractional
mhm.
work, which is more like for those listening, if you don't know, it's more of like a steady state part-time role, and particularly
Right.
probably more for leadership. But
Mm,
that's really on the rise. And
mm,
in many ways, like the people I know doing it, it's stressful for the same reason freelancing is stressful, because you sort of have to like hunt for your own food. But also that sort of flexibility, or like the people who came from an always on infinite workday kind of
mm,
lifestyle, feeling like this is all that's on offer. It turns out that's not all that's on
right.
offer, that there's other
Right.
ways of structuring our lives. And so sort of wading our way into that, being of course, being smart financially as well. Like this is also probably not the minute to get a rent that's twice as high or build or buy the house you can't afford. That's my own personal point of view in times of like
Right.
uncertainty. Like if
Sure.
you keep the expenses sort of stable, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to try on different kinds of lives that maybe aren't necessarily the full-time role that's really dependent on a company picking you.
Right. Right. Yeah. I talk about, well, one of my permissions is travel light. And I think it's kind of nurturing liquidity, if you will, like recognizing that you're optimizing for what you're describing, which is being sort of adaptive. So, the model of steady accumulation of resources worked in a predictable environment, but what it does in an unpredictable environment is wear you down and limit your choices because you're trying to protect those assets. Whereas if our model shifted towards what you've just described, like maybe it's a great time for me to explore other ways of structuring my life of understanding what good looked like in a way that didn't necessarily have to be more, that maybe the invitation, as you're describing with the disruption, is for us to look with lots of care and curiosity at how much happiness and satisfaction and meaning and growth has that old model conferred upon people, or has it really been about financial security and trading off some degree of satisfaction for that? Which is fine. That's a perfectly valid choice. But as with your friend, maybe there comes an invitation to go, huh, is there another way where the trade-off doesn't have to feel quite as stark, where I'm not giving up so much of myself in order to garner security? Maybe there's a chance in the coming years to find ways of doing that that are new and different and will probably feel weird, but what the hell? Why not give ourselves permission to try them out?
Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing about living a less work consumes my life kind of lifestyle is that in many ways I find I spend less money in that. Like when work is
Yeah,
consuming me,
yeah.
and like there have been periods where my husband and I we're just like well in it, so we are ordering
Mm.
takeout every night. We also live in New York City, so that's easy to do. Right.
Yeah,
Because like neither of us has time to like go grocery shopping or cook a nice dinner. Like we're doing that. We're sending our laundry out. We're like we're outsourcing it. It's like an expensive
right.
lifestyle to be stressed, right? And like, but to have time to cook a nice meal at night, like there's actually, I think, or maybe the way to say this is my husband and I were thinking back to when we first met. He was in
Mm,
grad school making, I want to say like $17,000 a year in his PhD program. I was
right,
working part-time at a school. So I was making, I think, $30,000 a year. And we thought back and we were like, we weren't unhappy. I feel like we had everything
right,
we need. We still got a cappuccino at the coffee shop once. I mean, like we still had our little,
right.
and so sometimes I like when things start to feel really uncertain and like he and I still have these conversations today. Like, what if he's a data scientist? What if his career goes away because AI does all the data science now? Like
Mm,
what are we going to do? So it's helpful. I think in all of this, it's helpful to think about what's the furthest I can fall and would I still be happy? And I'm
mm.
still pretty happy eating PB&J. Right? And that I think is like very fortifying, I
It really is. I mean, once you sort of baseline it there, you've got a lot of scope to try some new things out, to play around with your life and still come back to PB&J and a glass of milk at the end of the day. And I think, it's just interrogating sounds like a strong word, maybe just looking into, as you say, like what actually is making us happy versus what is it that we feel like we should have at this point in our lives? What do we feel like we should be doing? And I love kind of, a stressful life is an expensive one. Like that is gosh, we could spend a whole other conversation on that because it's so true.
Oh my God. Not
Um,
to mention like the blood pressure and cholesterol reports, like it's expensive in that
all of
way.
it, all of it, health, wellness, like, and I think that takes us to the book in some ways, does it not? I mean, because with the book, you're kind of inviting us to take a fresh look at work and how we understand it. So maybe we can wrap up with you telling us a little bit about that because I'm super excited for you to share that with the world.
Yay, thanks. I'm excited too. So, yeah, I mean, in many ways, what we've been talking about are really rhymes with the book. My
Okay.
my chief premise is that our joy and fun and pleasure at work matters. And I'm
Mm,
going so far as to argue that it matters first. And
okay.
I'm pushing back at the argument, the well-worn argument, which is not wrong, but I'm just tired of it, that employee engagement is important because it drives productivity and bottom line. That
Mm,
is true, and there's been so much research done on it. But to me, it's also not the point because your employees, or when you think of it for your own personal perspective, you are spending your finite days on the planet working 5 out of 7 days a week, probably, and then some. And
yeah.
that has value. So if we imagine an organization that has a great bottom line, but everybody is stressed, unhealthy, miserable, then is that a good company or not? Is that
Right.
company even worthwhile to exist? And so while I don't negate any of the importance of impact or profit, or like those are really important and actually like part of the fun of working. It's really fun to
Sure.
create value. It's fun to make money. Those things are all really good. But ultimately, if our experience of work is a dreadful one, if we are wishing away the work week, like, oh, can it be Friday yet? Why is it only Wednesday? We
Yeah.
are not only wishing away the work week, we are wishing away our lives. And I think
100%.
that's a big, big problem. And so I'm trying to make in the book, in many ways, the existential argument for why we should love our working days. And in it, share some practices for how to make work more joyful day in and day out. Things like getting rid of this performative professionalism where we need to be in suits or, at
Mm,
least business casual and speaking with jargon, how we can prioritize our relationships at work, because
mm,
the studies of human happiness are really clear. Like it's not
yeah.
productivity or revenue that drives human happiness, it's relationships. And so how can we
Mm,
prioritize those? And then how do we make sure that work is not taking over our lives? Can we decenter it just a little bit? It's still wonderful for you or anyone to feel passionate about their work and excited about it. I definitely do, but it's only one thing I'm excited about of many in my life. And
yeah.
and so that's what I'm hoping to do with the book. Ultimately, just hoping to get rid of the question, when will this week be over? I would like to eradicate that question from our vocabulary.
Oh, and what an important contribution at like a really critical time because I feel like your book is entering into a much bigger social and cultural conversation about the role of work in our lives at a point when we don't have the option to ignore that conversation. I mean, it is shifting, it will shift. And my hope is that in the cracks that are being created by the introduction of AI, we will, as you've described, be forced to, maybe for the better, kind of have a look at the role that work has played in our lives and for many, many people, the detrimental role that it's played. And the idea that we should enjoy what we're doing, gosh, that really shouldn't feel radical, right? Like, isn't that like so obvious? And yet it is. It's a radical, bold, and like really beautiful proposition that feels, I think, strangely enough, closer. Like it feels like it's a good time for us to start to kind of head in that direction. Like, and maybe there's space. that there wasn't even 10 years ago for us to have that conversation. So I really hope that lots of people will take up the invitation and, using my language, give themselves permission to imagine a world of work that looked joyful and fulfilling and enriching, because I think we could do it. Like I think there's a lot of impetus and a lot of people who have seen that the current operating model just isn't serving humanity in the way that it needs to. So tell us, when is it coming out?
July 15th. We'll be out in
So
bookstores,
soon.
bookshop, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you get your books.
Okay, awesome. And I'm sure we're going to see lots of you out in the world talking about it. And I honestly, when I thought about these conversations, I honestly, you were exactly the kind of person. I'm not trying to build you up, but you're exactly the kind of person who I imagined. And the conversation of like kind of normalizing and just embracing the fact that, you can have a life that evolves into many, many beautiful things. And if what we're on the cusp of will give more and more people permission to do that, then I think it might be a really exciting and interesting time. But they will have learned a lot from you over the course of this conversation. So thank you, Bree, for sharing not only your story with us, but so many of the insights, um, and the, kind of genuine takeaways that you've garnered from it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I also just want to say I love the framing of permissions because so much of enjoying our work, enjoying our lives is possible, but somehow we hold ourselves back. We feel like, oh, that's not allowed. Or am I, wait, is it okay that instead of working in the office, I go work in the park with my hotspot and my iced coffee and enjoy some sunshine? And it's like, yeah, you have
Yes,
permission. Like,
you do. I mean, it's so crazy the way that we have these built-in stories. And I think they are unraveling. They're obviously unraveling, but I think like what I'm trying to do and what you're trying to do is just to nudge that along ever more to just a higher level of intentionality, a higher level of sort of design of saying, let's not tiptoe, let's go for it. And yeah, we are allowed. We are absolutely allowed. There's no rules written down that say you can't, live a life that's a little fuller and richer. So yeah, this is like, girl power activated. Let's bring these,
yeah,
let's
we're
take this
gonna
out
be
there.
handing out permission slips, throwing them all over this.
I'm ready. I'm ready to do that. And so excited that you joined me here. Thank you, Bree. And so excited to see you out in the world over the next weeks and months sharing all your knowledge and experience with the world. Thanks.
Thank you.